screencast. We're going to cover fundamental image modification and manipulation in InDesign. To keep the process moving a little bit faster, you'll see that I already have a document created. It's 8.5:11 portrait with 0.5 or half-inch margins and 0.125 or 1/8 of an inch bleed. And for this particular screencast, I need you to make sure that you have your swatch panel open and available to you. If it's not visible on your work environment, workspace, you can simply go to Window and come down to where it says Color. There'll be a little flyout menu with color and gradient, and Adobe Color themes also nested with it. And if you click on swatches, it will make the swatch panel available. Okay. So the first thing we need to clarify is that images in general, there are two primary classifications of it. There's web file formats, and then there are print file formats. InDesign allows you to place almost any file format. I've never run into any type of situation that I was alerted that InDesign would not place an image, whether it be print or web. Sometimes that can work against this, and I'll be explaining about that in greater detail in the future. You also need to understand that images have their own specific dimensions, meaning their height and width, that has been created in either Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop or a similar image editing program. Right? So when we bring images in, they will take on the space that you have predetermined for them to occupy, or if we just simply bring them in or place them into InDesign, the InDesign will make use and make visible the entire artboard space, for the image's original dimensions. So please keep that in mind. I'm going to show you how you can kind of modify the image frames as well. Okay. So a few different things. First, we want to make sure that we're placing an image in InDesign. We do not want to open images in InDesign, nor do we want to drag an image from Illustrator or Photoshop onto our document in InDesign. That simply embeds a low resolution pict file, and again is something that's not practiced in our field, and can also be very problematic if this is something that would have to be professionally reproduced. Okay, so we're going to take a look at a few things first. We're going to place a series of images in, and we're going to examine how they can be placed into different environments. One, utilizing the image's current dimension settings, how we can utilize a structured image frame that has a predetermined size, and then also how to create a custom image frame to place images in. Okay. I am, for this screencast, making use of the folder on Blackboard for the photos and text folder. So if you would like to follow along, you can. And the first thing we're going to do, guys, I'm going to Command D or File Place. Remember, that's how we place images. So I like to use the shortcut key, Command D, and I'm inside the photos and text folder. And we're going to start with the flowers. So I'm simply going to double click on this, and if I just come up to the top corner where the margin is and click, you'll see that by clicking, all that does is that brings the image in and relies on its current dimensions that have been established in an image editing program like Photoshop. Okay. Next, I'm going to go Command D, and I'm going to select the flowers again. Now this time, I'm going to click and I'm going to drag, and wherever I let it put the mouse, that's going to tell InDesign this is the predetermined size that I, as the designer, want the image to be displayed at. So I click and I drag, and then I let up, and then it'll fill the image into that area proportionally as it should. Okay. Now next, we're going to come over, I'm going to grab our rectangle tool, and I'm going to click beside it, drag, and I'm not holding down shift. If I want to maintain proper proportions and constrain it to proper proportions, I can hold down shift. So I've created a text frame with that selected. If it's not selected, you'll need to make sure that it is. So I select image frame, hit Command D, locate the flowers again, paste it in. Now you'll notice that the differences in size. When you place an image into a structured image frame, it's going to commit at 100%. Okay, so this image size and this image size are the same as far as you know, the dimensions being reflected from the image editing program, where the one on the left, it's smaller because I drug a smaller square. Alright, so it's kind of, think of like this as a cookie cutter. Next, we're going to go over to the pen tool, and I'm going to just click, and I'm going to create just a real arbitrary, strange looking shape. And I think that in the future you'll find this to be a nice little benefit to creating some cool design compositions. But just like in Illustrator, you want to make sure that it's a closed path, right? If it's not a closed path, it won't work correctly. So I've closed my path, and again, with it selected, I'm going to hit Command D, and I'm going to double click on the flowers again, and it places the image into that shape. Okay, and remember, if nothing is selected, especially any text, if I hit W on my keyboard, that'll allow us to see images and body copy and such when we place it without any of the guides or frames. Okay, I'm going to go back to W, click W again so that I can see all of the edges of my picture frames. Okay, so one other thing while we have these images up, remember, when moving, remember you're utilizing the difference between the selection tool and the direct selection tool. When we want to move objects, we select them with the selection tool, it's important to see the blue bounding box that allows me to click and drag and reposition the images wherever I want them to be. Okay, so that's the blue bounding box and the selection tool. If I accidentally, guys, if I think I'm going to move this image to the right, but I accidentally click on the disk and then start to drag, you'll notice right away that it pulls the image out of the frame. And that is because, I'll hit Command Z here, it's because whenever I click this disk, please pay attention to the bounding box. Right now it's blue by selecting it, but as soon as I click on the disk, it automatically converts it to brown, and whenever I see that brown bounding box, it means that I have the image selected inside of the frame. Okay, so for those of you who take an art class, think about like when you have to do like an overlay with a matte, kind of like a framework, if you will. Alright, so I can do that with any of the images. If I click on that disk, I can shift their position around inside of the frame. Alright, so please just be mindful that sometimes it's a little misleading to students. They'll get a little confused whenever they start to move images around and notice that the frame's not moving, but the image is moving. Okay, so let's do a Command A, and let's delete that. So I'm going to hit Command A to select all, and I'm just going to hit delete. Next, we're going to take a look at sizing. Alright, so we're going to take a look at two images. They're the exact same image, but their dimensions, their physical dimensions that were created in an image editing program, in this case Photoshop, differ greatly. And this is important to understand whenever you're obtaining images from free resources, or if you're downloading something from the internet and you don't understand why something looks extremely blurry or pixelated. So I'm going to hit Command D, and the first thing we're going to double click on is the CMYK balloon small, and I'm just going to come up under the corner here and by the margins, and I'm just going to click. Alright, so we're going to place that image. So these are the physical dimensions of it coming out of Photoshop. I'm going to deselect. I'm going to hit Command D again, and this time we're going to choose the image above it, CMYK balloons TIFF. And I'm just going to do the exact same thing. I'm just going to come over here, hit click. Let me click and drag this back into our view path a little bit. So you can see that these dimensions for this image are much larger, right? So what happens is that if the image is too small and we think that it needs to be the same size, we can increase the image frame by utilizing the selection tool, selecting it, and then increasing it, right? I can drag this out to wherever I want. And then in order to increase the size of the image, I can use the direct selection tool, or I can click on that disk, right? So when I click this disk, you'll see the brown box appear. And then what's going to occur, I'm going to hold down Shift and drag to fill up this picture frame. And I let it up, and you can see how blurry this is, right? So same image, but because their dimensions and pixel resolution are different, that means that this one would be inappropriate for print production and commercial art, right? It's probably an image that's been set up to be displayed on a website, okay? So please keep that in mind whenever you place images and you go to enlarge or increase the size of them. Remember that the pixel and the physical dimensions of that image have a lot to do with how they'll be displayed on your system, and then also if you were to print this out or have it professionally reproduced. Okay. I'm going to do a Command A, and I'm going to delete those. And we're going to do Command D, and this time we're going to select the dune, and I'm going to click and drag with the dune. Let up, so we have a grayscale image here. When you want to resize an image, we talked about this a little bit in class, and I referenced the movie Scream and the Scream mask. What you want to pay attention to is when I select the image and see the blue bounding box up here in the top in the application bar, you're going to see this little reference point. This is going to tell us the X and Y coordinate positions for the image that has been placed. So if I want to move something, I can change this to say 2.5, and that'll shift that over, and if I were to draw a guide, it would line up with 2.5 inches, right? And we'll talk more about the reference point soon. But also what you want to look at is the width and height. It tells us the exact dimensions of the measurements of the square that the image frame occupies. But if we want to change the image size, remember if I do this, all it's going to do is just close up the frame. So it's kind of like, again, cookie cutter. But if I want to change the image size, I need to make sure that I have the image selected inside of the frame. So again, I can select this disk, or I can grab the direct selection tool, click once, you'll see the brown bounding box, and then you'll also see up top here the XY reference point positionings are going to be zeroed out. The width and height will remain the same because my image is 7.5 by 7.5 because it's occupying the entire image frame. But what I want you to note is this percentage here. This is telling us the percentage of the size. So this is actually at 90% of its full size. Okay. If a customer says they want this to be small and the image needs to be placed in at 50%, I need to make sure that the image is selected. And I can come up here under these proportions, type in 50, make sure that they're linked together by constraining their proportions for scaling. And if I just simply hit return, you'll note that the 50 and 50 are the exact same, and it's reduced it down to 50% of its size. Okay, I'm going to hit Command Z and go back to the 90%. What you want to avoid is manually skewing it with the potential possibility of distorting it. So I can manually skew or change the shape of an image, the sizing of it, by going to one of the corners. If I hold down Shift and click and drag and let go, and this is close, I got it instead of the 50, it's at 46%. But you'll note by holding down Shift it has maintained the proportions. All right. So think about professional representation. If you're placing, think about your yearbook. You would never want to have your photo placed into the yearbook and have it stretched and skewed. That would be unprofessional and inappropriate, right? So I'm going to hit Command Z. So what do we want to avoid? We want to avoid skewing images, which means if I were to go down to this corner and not hold down Shift and just simply drag into a particular position, you'll see how it's stretched and skewed, and that is reflected up top here in the option bar. It's at 45.96 and 62.88, meaning that it's skewed. So if I start stretching things, this means that the image is not being displayed correctly. Okay, so again, Command Z gets back to the starting point. You always want to make sure that you're holding down Shift, dragging from the corner, and then after that, if I want to reposition it, I can just click on the middle of it and reposition it wherever I want to inside of that image frame, and then I can select the image frame, and then with the selection tool, and then I can drag that image frame to butt up against the edges of the image. Okay, so it's extremely important that we don't skew or distort the representation of an image whenever we're trying to resize the image. Okay, so I'm going to hit Command A to select all. I'm going to delete that. And next we're going to talk about like the stacking order of images, and this is a direct relationship to the Chevy ad. So I'm going to hit Command D, and we're going to select the baseball. And the baseball is an Illustrator file, and I'm just going to click once. I want you guys to see that the image dimensions are much larger than the baseball itself, and we have to modify that a little bit. So I'm going to click here in the corner, and let me see, drag this out of the way a little bit. So you can see the blue frame, right? But it's just this baseball in the middle. That's because the document frame, whenever the image was created in Illustrator, was probably set to be 8.5:11. So if I drag this up into this corner, it should match up. Yeah, it's correct. Okay, so we don't want all this extra space around the image. So it's better practice. Just drag the frame, not the image. If I drag the image, it'll move it inside of the frame, or it may skew it if I accidentally grab one of the corners. So I'm just going to drag from the edge of the frame and pull this a little bit closer, just kind of tighten this up, because we don't want all that extra space around the image itself. Okay, deselect. So now I can click, move the baseball wherever I want, right? Because I'm selecting and I see the blue bounding box. All right, now images, I can either, if I want to duplicate this, I can hit, with it selected, I can hit Command C and then Command V, just like you would in Illustrator. Or I can hold down my Option key, and you see the twin arrows. I can click and drag, right? So now we have this stacking order, right? And maybe I want this baseball behind the other two. So there's a couple things I can do. I can select that baseball, and on my keyboard, there's hold down the Command key, and right beside the letter P, there's the left and right brackets. If I hit on the left bracket, the one that's facing left, it will put it behind the image that it was last created from. Or if I hit right bracket, Command right bracket, it'll bring it to the front. Okay, so Command left right bracket, Command right bracket. Or with it selected, I can go up under Object and come down to Arrange and send backward or send to the back. So if I hit send to the back, it'll place it behind both of them. Command Z. If I go to Object, Arrange, Send Backward, it'll put it behind the first baseball. All right. So again, let's say the customer wants it to be this baseball that's up front. They want it clean in the back. So I select that, Object, Arrange, Send to the back. Now it'll place it behind all the baseballs. Okay. I'm going to hit Command A. I'm going to delete those. And now I'm going to hit Command D, and we're going to place the black and white balloons, BW balloons TIFF, and I'm going to simply click and drag. Now some file formats, in this case it's a TIFF file format, allow us to colorize an image in InDesign. If the capability is available to you, it will be indicated in InDesign, but if it's a function that cannot be completed by InDesign, it simply won't give you the option to colorize the image. Alright, so a couple of things of note is that this is a black and white TIFF image in Photoshop. That is a file format in an image mode that's conducive to change or modify the color in a program like InDesign. And again, there are differences between selecting the image with the selection tool and the direct selection tool. Okay, if I select with the selection tool, like I have right now, I see the blue bounding box. It allows me to color the frame. So think about like having this image on a different color paper. So I'm going to use yellow. So if I select yellow from my swatches, you'll see how it displays the image as if the image is black and white but has been printed on a piece of yellow paper. Okay, and hit Command 0. Now if I select the image, I'll use the direct selection tool, and I'm going to select the image. So now I see the brown bounding box. You'll notice also on my fill and stroke, as long as it's visible and available to me, that means I can change the color. So I have the image selected. This time I'm going to select yellow again. Now you can see how it's actually changed the color of the image, right? So the first time, by selecting the frame, changes the frame or the background of the image. By selecting the image with the direct selection tool, it allows me to change the color of the image. So Command Z, let's try that one more time. So again, selection tool, select the frame, that's changing the background of it. So if I move the image around, see how there's a yellow background? It's pretty cool, huh? So Command Z a few times. But if I want to change the color of the image, I'll select it. I'm going to use the selected disk this time. So now I have the brown bounding box. Now I'm going to pick cyan. So now I have a two-tone image utilizing a couple of the colors from the swatch panel. Alright, pretty cool feature. So I'm going to hit Command D, or Command A, and we're going to delete that. We don't need it. Now I'm going to grab a rectangle from my geometric shapes. I'm just going to come out here and draw a rectangle across here, and we're going to add a fill color of a green, right? So I can swap those out just like I would in Illustrator. There's a fill and stroke down on the toolbar. We're going to make sure it has a fill of green, and I'm going to deselect it so that it's not selected, and I'm going to hit Command D, and we're going to grab the ducky EPS, and I'm going to click and drag. Okay, so the first thing you're going to note is that when the duck is placed, I can see the green bar behind it. That's because, like the black and white balloon image that was a TIFF file, images, and you'll learn in digital imaging that you can remove the background from images utilizing the various tools in Photoshop. So it allows for a scenario like this. I can bring an image in without necessarily having to make use of the background from the image. It's an excellent design technique. So it allows me to place objects or colors, accents, colors, and things like this, and even type. We're going to learn about how to work type with the type wrap around images onto a document, but it allows us to see whatever it is that's placed behind it. Alright, so you still may run into a situation where the duck is behind the green bar, right? So if we want it in front, we select it, go to Object, Arrange, bring to front, and that allows us to see the image on top of the geometric shape. Okay, you'll note that when I have the image, so if I select the image selected, right, so I'm able to move the duck inside of the image frame that I've created. Command Z gets back to the center. You'll note that now my swatches are grayed out. Okay, so this is a file format because the duck is full color and it's an EPS file. The background's been removed. I do not have the permission or the capability to change the color of the duck. I do, however, with the background removed, if I select the image frame. So I have the blue bounding box now. I do have the capabilities to change the color of the background. So now you can see my swatches are available, and I'll select cyan. So that changes the color of the background. I can still move the duck inside of the image frame. Okay, Command C. And that is a quick screencast on fundamental image manipulation and modification in InDesign.